So, whatever happened to that amazing nuclear-powered ship, the Proteus, from the classic 1966 science fiction adventure film Fantastic Voyage? Let's find out. Movies,
Music, and monsters.
Hey guys, Dan Monroe here, talking about movies, music, and monsters. Fantastic Voyage, one of my absolute favorite sci-fi adventure flicks that seemed to run endlessly on television during the 70s and 80s. I probably saw it more than 100 times even before I reached the ripe old age of 9. Now, before we get started, I'd like to personally thank Evan Wardwell and James Small for supplying some really cool information and photos on Fantastic Voyage that I now get to share with all of you guys. This super cool movie not only had an incredible cast, amazing special effects, a super cool ship, and a super hot star, but also had a very unique and interesting story. So, grab your favorite Raquel Welch poster and a bucket of stale popcorn, and let's dive in. The original concept of the Fantastic Voyage film was the brainchild of two gentlemen named Otto Clement and Jerome Bixby, who, after selling the idea to 20th Century Fox, proclaimed that this particular film would be, and I quote, the most expensive science fiction film ever made. With Richard Fleischer in the director's chair and David Soul to produce, the budget was set at a staggering $5 million, which, believe me, was a ton of money back in 1966, but then quickly escalated to $6 million, $3 million of which went towards the building of the sets, and $1 million just to capture the test footage. The cast of this film was just awesome, starring Stephen Boyd making his first Hollywood appearance in a movie in over 5 years. William Redfield was just terrific, playing the captain of the Proteus, and Donald Pleasance is simply awesome in just about anything he's ever been in. And I remember thinking the first time I watched this, something about this guy just don't seem quite right. Turns out, I was right. Once again, the saboteur, the bad guy, the Zachary Smith, so to speak. And then there's Raquel Welch. Let's see, what can I say about her? Well, I guess she looked pretty good, maybe a little rough around the edges, but every time the movie is on, I basically have to force myself to watch her on the screen. Such a chore, such a chore.
One of the first roles that I got really was in Fantastic Voyage, and that was a kind of a strange thing because I had done this little movie, Swingin' Summer, where I was just in a bikini, and it was one of those kind of beach blanket bingo things that you do. Cubby Broccoli, who is the producer of all the Bond movies, had thought that I would be a good Bond girl. But the movie wasn't starting right away, and it was kind of a technical thing, so they put me in Fantastic Voyage in order to hold on to the option. That's how I got into Fantastic Voyage, and then I was in 1 Million Years BC, and then, well, you know what happened.
According to Raquel Welch's own book, written in 2013, and this is weird, she was absolutely infatuated with Stephen Boyd during the production of this film, who, according to Raquel herself, declined her flirtatious advances and basically wanted nothing to do with her. I mean, wow. Really? Kind of cool. If you look really close on one of the little monitor screens before the mission begins, you'll see a very young James Doohan as Dr. Sawyer. No wonder the mission was such a success, they had Scotty at the controls. American writer and professor of biochemistry Isaac Asimov was asked to write the novelization of the film from the script, even though he was a little disappointed that the movie script was full of plot holes. Initially, he didn't want to take on the project at all because he claimed, and I quote, "It's simply beneath my dignity." Oh, well. The Asimov novel actually came out before the movie did, mostly because Asimov himself was a very fast writer, but also due to the fact that there were a lot of delays during filming. The 1960s and 70s gave us some of the most magnificent, recognizable, and memorable vehicles and ships that, in my opinion, were ever produced and have not yet been equaled to this day. The Starship Enterprise, the Galactica, the Jupiter II, the Nautilus, the Millennium Falcon, the Nostromo, the Seaview, the Martian War Machines, and of course, the Proteus from Fantastic Voyage. The ship's name, Proteus, came from the god of the sea and rivers from Greek mythology. Now, there were not one, but 4 models of the Proteus made for the Fantastic Voyage production. An extremely tiny 1.5-inch version that could literally fit in the palm of your hand, a mid-size 2.5-foot version with blue windows that was used for the blue screen process, a beautiful 5-foot Hero version, and an enormous 42-foot prop that was used for scenes where the actors interacted with the exterior and the interior of the ship. The ships were constructed by the 20th Century Fox Special Effects Department under the direction of L.B. Abbott, who was head of the Fox Effects Department and the man responsible for visual effects in many of the Irwin Allen TV shows and even Logan's Run. The 5-foot Hero version could be suspended by a system of wires, and an entire soundstage was used at Fox Studios to film this particular 5-foot version of the ship, going through both the heart and the brain. The Proteus models were always filmed on what was called a dry environment, but the special effects team put transparent layers of imitation blood cells over the final footage of the film to give you a sense that it was more or less floating through the human body.
Some of the stuff that was done in that movie was so excruciatingly difficult to do. And just to make a shot without the use of computers where you have control over everything, you're depending so many times on the happy accident.
This is actually kind of unique. In most Hollywood productions involving ships, there is a large exterior prop created, and then the interiors of the ship are usually filmed on a separate soundstage on the other side of the studio. But in this case, the full-size Proteus mock-up actually contained all the interior sets that the actors are seen in for the interior shots of the sub. Sections of the outer walls, or wild walls, could be pulled out to allow the cameras and crew to film the interiors of the ship. Here's a cute little story that made me wish I was on the crew myself. Apparently, when they were filming the scene where the crew members had to remove the attacking antibodies from Raquel Welch's body, the actors, attempting to act in a gentlemanly manner, avoided all the antibodies that were gathered around her, these. Well, the director would have none of it and told the cast members on the second take to grab whatever they wanted on Raquel Welch. And apparently they did. When the director yelled action, every guy on the set reached out to grab her, these. Well, that didn't go too well either, so the director eventually had to specifically choreograph which actor grabbed which parts of Raquel Welch. The trials and tribulations of acting on a Hollywood movie set. Who knew? To achieve the look of the actors swimming outside the sub, they were suspended from wires, which sort of came at a bit of a risk. To avoid the camera picking up the reflections from the metal wires, the wires were washed in acid to kind of roughen them, but that also made them a little more likely to break. All these scenes were shot at a higher film rate than normal, then played back at regular speed to give it a slower, smoother motion. All the shots of the secret CMDF medical facility were actually filmed in the upper and lower concourses of the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena, which director Richard Fleischer also used for exteriors in 1973's Soylent Green. This is awesome for all you Lost in Space fans out there. All that hanging, weird, spidery web alien-looking stuff used in the second episode, The Derelict, were actually some of the set dressings from Fantastic Voyage. The sound effect of the shrinking of the Proteus was also the sound effect of the Jupiter 2 engines from Lost in Space. Much of the quote-unquote technology used to create the sets could be seen on tons of movies and TV shows throughout the 1960s and 70s, including knobs like this one, which could clearly be seen on the upper flight deck of the Jupiter 2 from Lost in Space, and even all these round glass lenses made by a company called Dialite were used on the center chest panel of the Lost in Space robot. Consoles just like this one could clearly be seen in the first episode of Lost in Space, The Reluctant Stowaway. Standard 20th Century Fox set dressings, gotta love it. The musical score for this film was absolutely fantastic, written and conducted by legendary film and television composer Leonard Rosenman. This guy's catalog of work was absolutely outstanding, including East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, Star Trek: The Voyage Home, Beneath and Battle for the Planet of the Apes, the Lord of the Rings animated movie, and so many more. We could be here all day. Interesting, and I never really noticed this at first, but there was no music in the film at all until the actors and the Proteus enter the human body. Fantastic Voyage was released to theaters on August 16th, 1966, and received 5 Academy Award nominations, winning for Best Visual Effects and Best Art Direction in Color. The film received mostly positive reviews with both critics and audiences. Variety gave the film very high praise, stating that the lavish production, boasting brilliant special effects and superior creative efforts, is an entertaining, enlightening incursion through the inner space, the body of man. Wow, that's a review. Financially, at least according to the Fox box office records, the film needed to earn $9.4 million to break even, but only pulled in around $8.8 million, so it showed a slight loss. But believe me, all of that was made back in spades through home video sales and all the thousands of times it ran on network television back in the day. Well, Fantastic Voyage came and Fantastic Voyage went, but that certainly wasn't the end of this classic 1960s sci-fi flick. A very short-lived animated TV series based on the film, aired on Saturday mornings on ABC from September 1968 through January 1969, containing 17 half-hour episodes. The series was produced by the Filmation company that also did some super cool live-action shows like Space Academy, Jason of Star Command, Arc 2, and Shazam. Okay, but whatever happened to all the magnificent costumes, models, and props from the film? Well, as far as the original costumes went, primarily they were just white jumpsuits, and since none of them have ever shown up, at least to my knowledge, we generally assume that the patches were simply removed and the jumpsuits were then simply returned to the studio costume department. Now, as far as the fate of the enormous 42-foot full-size prop of the Proteus, well, folks, that's just another sad Hollywood prop story, I'm afraid. But hang on, as just a preface, this is a prevailing theory that just seems to fit the facts. Legendary producer Irwin Allen, who created such timeless classics as Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Lost in Space, Land of the Giants, and more, was certainly a brilliant movie maker and television producer. But he was also very cheap and had a tendency to save money wherever he could. So, during the production of Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, Irwin Allen decided that he wanted to add a rescue vessel to the film. So he went out to 20th Century Fox and started rummaging through the studio warehouses, located the original full-size Proteus prop, made a lot of modifications and changes to the structure itself, repainted it orange, got ready to begin filming, and then Irwin decided he just didn't want to use it after all. So it was dismantled and sold for scrap. A very bitter end to such a gorgeous and iconic full-size ship, but that's Hollywood. However, there's always two sides to every coin. The last time the full-scale prop was seen, I believe, was around 1976 in an American Cancer Society promotion which focused primarily on the interior set. Now, regarding Irwin Allen's refit of the ship and spray painting it orange, renowned art director Bill Creber actually denied this entire story. So again, it might be true, might not. Unfortunately, there's no hard evidence either way, so lines are open, you decide. On a much more positive note, the smaller Proteus sub with the blue windows, used for special effects blue screen shots, does still exist. According to reports, it was sold at auction for around $20,000 and is now in the possession of a private collector. The gorgeous Hero 5-foot filming model of the Proteus also miraculously survived. This hero prop first showed up in a Profiles in History auction in December of 2005, and wow, I remember seeing this back in the day and thinking it's unbelievable that this prop still exists in this condition so many years later. The model then disappeared for many years until it suddenly reemerged recently in 2024 at a Julien's auction, and here it is. This unbelievable filming miniature was designed by Harper Goff, who also designed the Nautilus for the 1954 film 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and you can certainly see a lot of similarities between the two. This prop was expertly restored by its previous owner, legendary Hollywood model maker Greg Jean, and was even exhibited in 1990 at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. Constructed primarily of fiberglass at a scale of approximately 1/8, it featured forward and rear driving planes, telescoping landing legs, and even had figures of each of the submarine's crew members. And if you look real close, you can even see amazing small details like a newspaper and even a can of Coors beer. This amazing 5-foot hero filming miniature of the Proteus eventually sold for over $158,000. I have no idea who the winner of this amazing prop was, but it's just great to know that this iconic piece of Hollywood history still exists. Okay, but what about the extremely small 1.5-inch miniature of the Proteus? Well, I would certainly take this with a grain of salt, or maybe it's true, who knows, but the prevailing rumor theory is that during production, this tiny miniature was outside, and I'm not kidding, a crow swooped down from the heavens, grabbed the model, and literally just flew off with it. You heard me right, a crow. Who knows? All I do know is that this very tiny miniature of the Proteus has never surfaced since the production of the film, so I suppose your guess is as good as mine. I certainly hope, however, that this doesn't end up being true, because then I guess I would have to eat crow. The super cool surgical laser gun from Fantastic Voyage was once again borrowed by Irwin Allen, slightly modified and used in an episode of Lost in Space called Deadliest of the Species. This amazing prop eventually sold at auction in March 2016 for the unbelievable price of 80 grand. How cool is that? Okay, but what about all the reboots, remakes, and God help us reimaginings? Well, there have actually been quite a few interested directors looking at this film ever since the 1980s, even though to this day nothing has yet materialized. Really weird, at one point, comedian actor Mike Myers proposed a possible idea for a movie featuring his Austin Powers character called Shagtastic Voyage, in which Austin Powers would be injected into the body of Dr. Evil, but that never happened, but it does sound kind of funny. In 2007, 20th Century Fox announced that pre-production planning would begin on a brand new Fantastic Voyage project produced by James Cameron and directed by Roland Emmerich, who eventually rejected the script, so that entire plan was dropped. However, in 2010, Paul Greengrass was considering directing another remake, again being produced by James Cameron, but that too was dropped. In 2016, Del Toro was in talks to direct yet another reboot, again with James Cameron, but that was delayed so Del Toro could begin filming his masterpiece, The Shape of Water. But wait, there's more. In April 2024, James Cameron gave an update on this project, stating, and I quote, "We plan to go ahead with it very soon." So, I suppose only time will tell, and like I always say, in a way, I kinda hope it never happens. Classic film, classic cast, loads of wonderful 1960s adventure-filled fun, just leave it alone. Hey, Hollywood, here's an idea. Get someone to come up with something, I don't know, original. There was an Atari 2600 video game produced by Fox Video in 1982. There was a Fantastic Voyage board game by Milton Bradley and a Fantastic Voyage animated series Viewmaster set. Ben Cooper released a Jonathan Kidd Halloween costume, again from the animated series. Gold Key Comics released a Fantastic Voyage issue based on the movie in 1966, and later other comics based on the animated series. Mobius Models produced an amazing 1/32nd scale Proteus model with interior kit, which is absolutely stunning, and if you can find one, could set you back upwards of around $150. Now, for those of you on Facebook, there's a fantastic page called Fantastic Voyage 1966 to Remake, created by Evan Wardwell, dealing with all things Fantastic Voyage, both in front and behind the camera. Check it out. Link in the description. Fantastic Voyage was not only one of those extremely memorable sci-fi adventure flicks from the 1960s that we all loved so much to watch on any given Saturday afternoon, but also opened up the entire genre with imaginative possibilities, taking audiences places they could only dream of, and paving the way for such incredible sci-fi movie and television shows of the late 60s and 70s, including Damnation Alley, Future World, Battlestar Galactica, The Omega Man, The Black Hole, Dark Star, Logan's Run, The Andromeda Strain, Westworld, Star Wars, and so many more. We could be here all day, but that, my friends, is the topic of another video. I really hope you guys enjoyed that deep dive into Fantastic Voyage, and if you did and you like this kind of stuff, please consider subscribing to the channel. I've got a whole bunch of new videos coming up really soon that I know you guys are just gonna dig. And please feel free to stop back anytime as we continue together our conversation on movies, music, and monsters.
Movies, music, and monsters.